One of the questions I get asked so frequently, which is unsurprising given my what I post on social media and what I do for a living, one of the questions that I get asked so frequently is whether or not a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler or a Malinois or a Dutch Shepherd is a good choice for somebody who's looking to add a dog to their life. And that's not always an easy question to answer. So I'm going to go through some of the considerations that I share with people typically, as well as adding a little bit of colour as to why I give people these considerations. So, first off, German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds, Belgian Shepherds, of which a Malinois is a subtype, and Rottweilers, these are dogs which, regardless of what you think, these are dogs that have been bred for doing law enforcement type work. Now, certainly, we tend to see the German Shepherd, the Dutch Shepherd, and the Malinois being used much more frequently than the Rottweiler. However, I commonly get asked about the Rottweiler and the same advice stands. So, what you need to understand is, if you're looking to add one of these breeds to your life, you need to understand the purpose that these dogs have been bred for. Along with being highly trainable, these dogs are bred to have some very, very prominent behaviour. They are also bred, when they're well bred, to be emotionally stable dogs. Now, if you're lucky enough to crack the code and get on to a breeder that understands what they're looking at and has done a good job of pairing some dogs together to produce puppies, then essentially that emotional stability in the first instance is going to be the responsibility of the breeder to create, which means that it's your responsibility as a potential consumer of the dogs that they create, a purchaser, it's your responsibility to do your homework on this breeder. Now, any breeder of German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dutch Shepherds or Malinois that is not a highly accomplished trainer is going to be, broadly speaking, subject to seeking the opinions of others about the dogs that they breed. This is not a desirable situation to be in. In all circumstances that I'm aware of, the most consistent and trustworthy producers of German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dutch Shepherds and Malinois are skilled trainers themselves. Now, if your breeder is not a highly skilled trainer, you need to understand that their own understanding of their own dogs is likely to be limited. This is not a slight on anybody, this is just a fact. Now, add to this, even if you take a highly skilled trainer, but they tend to have a very narrow focus, you can still wind up with dogs that are very, very suitable for an application, but not necessarily suitable for the application that you want them to have. So, when you start looking around for breeders, not only should you be able to see footage of these breeders doing great work with their dogs, the main thing you should be asking for when you start shopping for these puppies is video of the parents or the parent, if it's done by AI, functioning in very dynamic situations, in greatly varied environments, navigating complex situations, and doing so with a centered demeanor, right? Not behaving scared, not behaving timid, right? You should have a bold dog that is capable of thinking. Moving on from there, if someone's asking me for a recommendation to a breeder, my list is fairly small at the moment of breeders that I trust to know what they're looking at and then choose dogs based on really knowing the stock to produce a great outcome. Let's be really clear though here. if you're coming for a recommendation about a Rottweiler, a German Shepherd, a Dutch Shepherd, or a Malinois, the only recommendation that you will get from me is to a working breeder that fulfills the criteria that I've outlined. And I've explained to you why that's going to be. Nobody should buy a German Shepherd, Malinois, Dutch Shepherd, or Rottweiler based on the idea that their friends have one, that dog is lovely, and it appears to be a fairly low maintenance, easy dog to own. These are not dogs that are bred to be easy to own. They are dogs that are bred to be highly trainable. You are looking at a relatively large training investment for any of these dogs. 2.5 to 3 years plus maintenance, minimum. Rearing these puppies is a fairly large time expense, particularly during their first 5 months of life, because the environmental stimulation and exposure work that you need to do to ensure that these dogs turn out well is beyond crucial. Now, in terms of training, if someone doesn't have a demonstrable actioned history of being interested in dog training, it's unlikely that they'll develop one just because they buy a dog of a certain breed and type. However, having said that, it's not impossible. But if you think that you're going to own one of these proud working breeds and simply turn up to your neighbourhood obedience club every Sunday, run through a curriculum, and then your dog's going to turn out great, you are going to fail to hit the mark and you are probably going to run into some serious problems. Let's look at why. All of these dogs have competitive curriculums that involve bite work as a primary part of their proving ground in their countries of origin, which means that the work that they do is equal to or greater than the way that they look when it comes to selection. All of these training cultures, all of these sporting curriculums involve high touch point training. There are no single weekend classes that are going to fit these dogs. These dogs are designed to be trained. Particularly Belgian Shepherds and Dutch Shepherds, they're sensitive dogs very oftentimes. And so I would argue that the training expenditure in terms of time on these dogs is going to require even more than perhaps a German Shepherd or Rottweiler may. Although you should be doing the same work with all of them in terms of your environmental exposure work. Now, as I've said, turning up to a neighbourhood obedience club once a week isn't going to cut it. You need to develop an interest. If you don't have one, you need to quickly develop an interest in becoming a high-quality amateur dog trainer. This is not a hands-off thing where you can put any of these dogs in a backyard and expect them to turn out great. I don't really care if you have a friend who owns a German Shepherd or owns a Rottweiler or owns a Malinois and that dog seems really chill and easy. That's not what they're supposed to be. So no slight on your friend's dog, who I'm sure is very awesome, but that's not a reason why people should buy one of these breeds. If you're not prepared to be committed to a serious level of training for these dogs, and training these dogs to quite a high level, lots of training for action, and also including training for abstinence, then owning one of these breeds is not for you. If you're coming to me and going, well, I don't want a working line Rottweiler, I don't want a working line German Shepherd, or I don't want a working line Malinois, I'm not going to be able to help you choose which breeder to work with, because all breeders that truly care about their breed, be it any one of those 4 that I've mentioned, after considering the reproductive and genetic health of their dogs, their number one priority is developing in their breeding program the willingness, attitude, and aptitude for the dogs they breed to perform the tasks that these dogs were developed for. Now, back in the history of all of these dogs, they all have a history of great utility and some versatility. But what you cannot take away from your understanding is the fact that these dogs should have the courage to hunt, bite, and fight bad people. So unless you train in such a way that gives you a great level of reach into their behaviour, unless you strongly build the preferential behaviours, unless you train in such a way that massively appeals to these dogs, you shouldn't be owning one of these dogs. So I can't refer you to a show line breeder because I have nothing to do with them. It's not because I hate them as people. I just don't have reason to deal with them in the course of my work and in the course of my life as a dog training enthusiast. Again, these breeds are not bred to be show dogs. Showing dogs was only ever meant to formalise the appearance of the dogs to allow them to do their job. And ultimately, it doesn't matter how a dog looks if it won't do its job. A dog that looks 85% like a Rottweiler but performs 100% like a Rottweiler is a lot more Rottweiler than a dog that looks 100% like a Rottweiler and performs 30% like a Rottweiler. And that applies for all of these other breeds. So, selection of breeders is important. Next is selection of your puppy. If you're going to be viewing the parents, you need to put a big focus on getting hold of the footage of these dogs coping with very dynamic and complex situations and navigating them well. You're probably not going to know what you're looking at, and the majority of these working breeders are not going to allow you to choose from any puppy in the litter. At best, they may offer you 2 or 3 to have a choice from. And that's because they understand their dogs. And in almost every case, these breeders are breeding to keep dogs from the litters they produce because they're breeding to produce dogs that they want to train and own and potentially sell into law enforcement and military roles. So there we go, guys. These are some of the realities on the ground. I hope that has offered some kind of context and colour to the topic, and I hope that this is really useful for anyone that's watching this. But for now, that's the end of that topic for me. You guys take care. See you soon.